Imagine if you could quickly scan a room and a glowing red arrow would appear above every self-absorbed and potentially dangerous narcissist in the room. That would be an incredible superpower, wouldn't it? Well, we don't quite have those powers yet, but by using your own discernment and some common red flags, you can come incredibly close. This way you don't really have to worry too much about going on a second date with a self-absorbed narcissist. There's some good stuff here that I want to get to, and I don't want to waste any time, so let's get to it. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and on this channel we talk about emotional abuse, self-development, and sometimes we sprinkle in a little bit about spirituality. If those topics have touched your life, you may find the content here interesting. If so, I suggest you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a video. So today we're talking about how to spot a narcissist on a first date. And I want to be very clear that we are not diagnosing narcissistic personality disorder, and we're not labeling anyone as malignant narcissists, especially not someone we just met. The purpose of this video is to look for those red flags and use our own intuition to determine whether this person is someone who might be worth a second chance or not. Because if you've known a narcissist, if you've ever dated a narcissist, or if you've married a narcissist, I'm sure there have been moments where you wish you had a rewind button where you can just go back to that first date and just review everything, just watch the tapes and see if there are any clues that this person may have become the emotionally abusive person that you've come to know. And a lot of times these warning signs, not only are they extremely subtle, but they could also point to something else, especially nerves. So that's why your own discernment and your intuition in the moment plays such a major role in deciding whether somebody is so highly narcissistic or seems so highly narcissistic that it's time to walk away. So one of the first things to look for is that humble or not so humble brag. Now, when you're on a first date with someone, or when you just first meet someone, that's kind of the chance to get to know them. You're getting to know the other person, and hopefully the other person is trying to get to know you too. So talking about your accomplishments is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's in how they do it and how often they do it. If somebody's dominating the conversation with things that only they are comfortable with, areas where they have really excelled in their life, and you don't really have a lot to contribute to the conversation, but it keeps gravitating towards that person's accomplishments, that's a major red flag. This is a time where, again, you're both supposed to be getting to know each other. So if this person only really wants to shout with a megaphone all of his or her accomplishments and convince you of his or her awesomeness, and they really don't seem to care much about you or what you've done at all, or what you're interested in, or even if you're interested in their accomplishments, it's a sign that this person is highly narcissistic because they are really only showing interest in themselves. So the second sign that you might be on a date with a narcissist is that they dominate the conversation. So they're going to control the conversation and where it goes. If you try to sway the conversation in another direction, they will either subtly or not so subtly bring it back to where they wanted it to be. You get the feeling that they are in control the whole time. They're like the captain of the ship, and they will accept nothing less than your cooperation. So here are a couple of red flags that this is going on in your date. They will talk over you. They will show zero interest in your perspective or anything else you want to talk about. And if you say something that attempts to change the subject, or if you approach it from a different perspective that they don't want to hear, you'll be met with a blank stare, and then they'll pretend like you didn't say anything at all. They just continue on with the conversation as if you said nothing. So the third sign that you might be on a date with a narcissist is that you get the sense that they're suddenly head over heels. They're talking about things that are way beyond your comfort level with this person. They're trying to make it feel like you've known them forever, like you're best friends, like your soulmate, like you're destined to be together. And on this first date, they might even be planning a future together. And it might not be so obvious as talking about getting married. It might just be talking about doing things like as if you're a couple when you've really only just met. So it's kind of that feeling of jumping the gun, but getting a little bit too close too fast. So I have kind of a similar example that illustrates this, I think, pretty well. This was years ago when I was attempting online dating. I had met somebody online and we decided that we were going to meet up in person. And, we had exchanged a few messages back and forth. And because of my schedule, we couldn't meet right away. But it really felt like this person latched on. Like, I didn't know of him at all yesterday. But today I'm getting a text, good morning. I'm getting a text, good night. And I'm getting 5 texts in between that. And we haven't even met in person yet. And more than that, I'm getting the sense that he's getting frustrated that I'm not texting back fast enough. It can feel overwhelming. So to recap, the red flags: instant attachment, pretending they know you better than they do, or acting like they know you better than they do, and using actions and words that imply that you're already in a committed relationship. Saying things like, I miss you, when you didn't even know this person a week earlier. If you are dealing with a narcissist, this is what's often called love bombing. It's a phase of the relationship where they rush intimacy to get you to let your guard down. And once you do, that's when the devaluation phase begins, and then eventually the discard. The fourth sign that you are on a date with a narcissist is that you'll catch them lying. They might tell you stories that just really don't add up. They don't make sense, but somehow they make the person you're on a date with look really good. But if you're doing the online dating thing, which I think a lot of people are doing now, especially since, COVID restrictions make it a little bit more difficult to meet people organically. So I think a lot more people are probably online dating. And if you're doing that, one of the biggest red flags is that their profile does not match who they are. So when you meet them, you find out that they lied on their profile. Maybe they used an older picture, or maybe they said things that weren't true. People who are highly narcissistic can be very impulsive, and they don't necessarily think through consequences. So if they're trying to get their way, they're going to get their way, they're going to use any means possible. So lying is something that's going to come naturally to them. They'll lie and they won't necessarily think about the consequences. They won't think about having to answer to it later. So as long as they can get that date, as long as they can get that foot in the door, then they might be likely to think that they can charm their way into your heart or into your life. And we always wonder why people think this is going to work, right? Like, why do people catfish? Why do people use a completely different profile picture and then show up looking like themselves and expect that the other person isn't going to have an issue with it or think it's a little bit off? But we have to remember that the mind of a narcissist or a highly manipulative person is going to be very different from the mind of somebody who's not a narcissist or a manipulative person. Instead of using logic and reason, what they're doing is trying to see, what can I get? How far can I push to get what I want? And so the logic and the reason often don't even factor into that equation at all. So some red flags: telling extravagant stories where they're the hero, telling little white lies that you can tell are obvious lies, and lying on a dating profile, or even admitting openly to lying to other people. So the fifth sign that you are on a date with somebody who is highly narcissistic is that this person will have a superiority complex and or a sense of entitlement that is extremely obvious. And somebody who is a more overt type, somebody who has these grandiose notions of who they are and of their own self-importance, they might be a little bit more obvious about it, but you can usually tell in somebody's tone of voice how they speak to people who they don't find useful in the moment, or people who they think are in a class that is below them somehow. And those feelings of entitlement will come out whenever they aren't getting their way. Let's say you're at a restaurant and they ran out of today's special, and that's what your date wanted. Narcissists especially do not like hearing the word no. So if they're not getting their way, you might see a little bit of a fit. It's that adult tantrum that we talk about so often. And this is what causes them to act in a way that is extremely pushy when they're not getting their way with you and when they're not getting their way with other people. Even if they try to suppress it, even if they don't throw an all-out fit, if you notice that they're having trouble getting over it, that they couldn't get their way and they can't get it off their mind, this could be a warning sign that this person is highly narcissistic. Again, things are often very situationally dependent, and it's up to your own discernment and your own intuition in the moment. If you see somebody act in that way and it feels understandable to you, then this red flag may not apply in that situation or in that moment. It is, again, up to you and your own discernment. But these are things to look for. These are things to pay attention to. So the sixth way that you may be able to spot a highly narcissistic person on a first date is in how they explain their past relationships. And this may also point to a victim mentality. So if this person is talking about their ex like he or she is the devil, like he or she is the most evil person, and they had absolutely no role in this, they just went along for the ride. I hate to say it, but that is also a red flag. I know that a lot of viewers here have been in emotionally abusive relationships, as have I. And so this could be a little bit of a tricky one, because when you first get out of that relationship, especially, you're thinking about what that person did wrong. What is wrong with that person? I have a video where I talk about that moment for me too, and where things turned around. I'll link to that one too. But there comes a point where you can talk about it briefly. You can have a normal conversation with someone else without going down that rabbit hole. So if the person you're with, if you're on a date with somebody who's going down that rabbit hole, either they are a perpetual victim or they're fresh out of that relationship or maybe still wrapped up in it. And you have to ask yourself if that's either way, if that's something you want to be involved with. So the red flags here are really talking a little bit too much about the ex or about a bad situation that happened where they were the victim. So if you notice a theme where this person is victimized at work and past relationships in their family, that is something to pay attention to. So the seventh way you may be able to spot a narcissist on the first date is when they show an apparent lack of empathy. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does somebody show an apparent lack of empathy on a first date? What I found from experience, and not just with first dates, but just in meeting people and first encounters with people, is that people will show those true colors through the stories they tell. And I have an example from my life. It wasn't a date, it was kind of a business thing. I was hiring someone for an event and we had an interview. Everything seemed to go great. It was very casual. We were just talking. Everything seemed fine. And then towards the end, he comes out with this off-color joke that was just not funny at all. It was about disabled people. And I think he even used the R word. This was the first time I met this person. And it left me thinking, one, what about me made you think that I'd be okay with that? And two, you don't know me. What if somebody very close to me had the very disability that you're blatantly making fun of right now? It shows a very obvious lack of empathy. Now, again, I'm not saying this person was a narcissist, but that is highly narcissistic behavior, because that person is not thinking at all about how their words are going to land and whether their words are going to hurt somebody else. So red flags, saying things that can be hurtful to another person, or making off-color jokes, saying things when there's a good chance that they're going to have a negative impact on the person you're talking to, but you say them anyway and don't seem to care. So those are the 7 ways you may be able to spot a narcissist or somebody who's highly narcissistic on a first date. And again, this is all about your own discernment and your own intuition. I've learned to trust my intuition, and whenever I have suppressed it, I have regretted it big time. So trust your gut. if you notice any of these warning signs and you get that feeling that something's off, even if everything else seems good, pay attention to that feeling. If you found this video helpful, please let me know by hitting the like button. And if you'd like to see more like it, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.